The grandfather paradox. If you use a time machine to stop your grandparents from meeting, you might prevent your own birth. But if you were never born, how could you have used the time machine in the first place? The Ship of Theseus. If every part of a ship is replaced over time, is it still the same ship? And if you use all the old parts to build a new ship, which one is the real Ship of Theseus? Zeno's paradox, Achilles and the tortoise. Achilles races a tortoise and gives it a head start. Zeno says Achilles can never catch the tortoise because before he reaches its current position, the tortoise moves forward. But in reality, Achilles will easily win. The Bootstrap Paradox. If you travel back in time and give Shakespeare a copy of his own works, Shakespeare will publish them as his own. But who actually wrote them? The paradox loops in on itself. The twin paradox. One twin stays on Earth while the other travels through space at nearly the speed of light. According to Einstein's theory of relativity, time moves slower for the twin traveling at high speeds. When the traveling twin returns to Earth, they will have aged less than the twin who stayed behind. This happens because the traveling twin experienced time differently while moving at such a fast speed. The paradox is that, even though both twins experience time, their aging is different due to the effects of moving at such high speeds. The unexpected hanging paradox. A prisoner is told he will be hanged at noon on one weekday, but it will be a surprise. The prisoner tries to figure out when it will happen by eliminating days. He reasons that it can't happen on Friday, because then it wouldn't be a surprise. He eliminates Thursday for the same reason, and so on, until he's left with no days. However, when the hanging happens on Wednesday, he's still surprised. The Sorites Paradox. If you keep removing one grain of sand from a heap, at what point does it stop being a heap? The paradox of the ravens. The statement "all ravens are black" suggests that any time you see a raven, it should be black. Now, if you see a black raven, it makes sense that it supports the idea that all ravens are black. But here's the paradox. If you see a green apple, it doesn't contradict the statement "all ravens are black," because the apple isn't a raven. So, technically, seeing a green apple also confirms the hypothesis, even though it seems irrelevant. The paradox of the barber. There is a barber who shaves everyone in town who does not shave themselves. The paradox arises when we ask, does the barber shave himself? If the barber shaves himself, then according to the rule, he shouldn't, because he only shaves people who don't shave themselves. But if he doesn't shave himself, then he must shave himself, because he shaves everyone who doesn't shave themselves. This creates a contradiction. The Newcomb Paradox. You have two boxes, one transparent with $1,000 and one opaque that may have $1 million. A predictor has already guessed your choice. If it predicts you'll choose only the opaque box, it will have $1 million inside. If it predicts you'll take both, the opaque box will be empty. The paradox is deciding whether to trust the prediction and just take the opaque box, or take both because it's the safer option. The Pinocchio Paradox. Pinocchio says, "My nose will grow now." If his nose grows, then he's telling the truth, which means his nose shouldn't grow because he's lying. But if his nose doesn't grow, that means he's lying, which would make the statement true. This creates a paradox because both possibilities, the nose growing or not growing, lead to a contradiction. The Crocodile Paradox. A crocodile catches a child and promises to return him if the parent correctly guesses what the crocodile will do next. The paradox arises because if the parent guesses that the crocodile will not return the child, the crocodile cannot logically comply with the promise to return the child, since the parent's guess would be true. The paradox of the knower. If someone knows that they know nothing, do they actually know something? The Fermi Paradox. The universe is vast and filled with billions of stars and planets. So why haven't we found any signs of extraterrestrial life? The paradox is the contradiction between the high probability of life and the lack of evidence. The lottery paradox. You buy a lottery ticket knowing the odds are against you. Statistically, you're unlikely to win, but you still believe you might be the winner. The paradox is that, even though you know the chance of winning is small, you still think your ticket is special, despite the overall improbability. The paradox of the preface. A book's preface states it may have errors, but each chapter is logically true. If the chapters are all true, how can the whole book contain errors? It's a paradox about certainty versus possibility. The circular paradox. A statement like this statement is true because it says so loops back on itself, making it impossible to determine its truth or falsehood, creating a paradox of self-reference. The paradox of the selfish gene. Genes are described as selfish because they are focused on survival and reproduction. However, humans often act altruistically, helping others even at a personal cost. This seems to contradict the idea of genes being selfish, since helping others might reduce your own chances of survival or reproduction. The absent-minded driver paradox. A driver takes the same route every day and becomes so familiar with it that they can drive on autopilot, without thinking about every turn. However, if they miss a turn and end up somewhere unexpected, even though they believe they were paying attention, it creates a paradox. The paradox is that, despite being fully engaged in the act of driving, the driver can still make a mistake and end up in an unexpected place. The Dichotomy Paradox. To reach a destination, you must first cover half the distance, then half of the remaining distance, and so on. But since you keep having the distance, you'll never fully reach the destination. The Paradox of Analysis. Defining a term should make things clearer, but the more you analyze a concept, the more abstract and complicated it can become, creating a paradox about clarity and understanding. The Grelling, Paradox. A word is self-referential if it describes itself, but heterological describes words that don't describe themselves, leading to a paradox about classification and language. The Monty Paradox. There are 3 doors, one with a prize behind it. After one losing door is revealed, you're asked if you want to switch. You should switch, but it feels counterintuitive because your first choice seemed just as likely. The Paradox of Omnipotence. Can an omnipotent being create a stone so heavy that even they can't lift it? It's a paradox that challenges the limits of power and the idea of an all-powerful being. The Paradox of Free Will. If everything is determined by prior events, can we really make free choices? If our actions are predestined, are we truly free, or are we just following a set path? The Prisoner's Dilemma. 2 criminals are arrested and given a choice. They can either cooperate with each other and stay silent, or betray the other and confess. If both stay silent, cooperate, they'll both get a light sentence. If both betray each other, they both get a moderate sentence. If one betrays and the other stays silent, the betrayer goes free, while the other gets a heavy sentence. The paradox arises because, even though both criminals would get a better deal if they cooperate, the fear of betrayal leads both to betray. The No-Show Paradox. An event is planned, and everyone expects to attend, but because everyone assumes others will attend, no one shows up. It's a paradox about social expectations and collective action. The Sleeping Beauty Paradox. A woman is told she'll be woken up on Monday or Tuesday, but she won't know which day. The paradox is about calculating the probability of it being Monday when she wakes up, given the conditions. The Paradox of Unexpected Termination. A machine is programmed to stop unexpectedly, but no matter when it stops, it's always considered an unexpected termination. This paradox challenges predictability and surprise. The Paradox of the Bystander Effect. During an emergency, the more people around, the less likely anyone is to help because everyone assumes someone else will. This paradox challenges group behavior and individual responsibility. The Vortex Paradox. A vortex can never be reached because each step toward it makes the distance feel even greater. The Paradox of the Single Cause. If everything happens for a single reason, then that reason must be the cause of everything that happens. However, if that reason is the cause of everything, then how can there be any independent actions or events? The Infinite Monkey Paradox. Given infinite time, an infinite number of monkeys typing randomly on typewriters would eventually type out Shakespeare's works. The Paradox of Choice. More choices lead to greater dissatisfaction, not happiness. The paradox is that having more options often makes us feel less satisfied, not more content. The Paradox of the 2 envelopes. You're given 2 envelopes, one with more money than the other. If you pick one, you have a 50% chance of getting more, but switching seems to always suggest you should pick the other one instead. The Paradox of the Unexpected Guest. An invitation is sent to a party, with the expectation that a certain number of guests will attend. But when everyone assumes someone else will decline, no one declines, and the party becomes overcrowded. The Chicken and Egg Paradox. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? The Paradox of the Arrow. According to Zeno's paradox, an arrow in flight is stationary at every individual moment in time. At each moment, it occupies a specific location and is not moving. It's at rest at that instant. But if the arrow is stationary at every moment, how can it be moving at all? The Paradox of the Infinite Hotel, Hilbert's Hotel. Imagine a hotel with an infinite number of rooms, all occupied. A new guest arrives, and the paradox is that you can still make room for them by shifting each guest to a higher-numbered room, leaving room for the new one. The Paradox of the Watchmaker. The Watchmaker Paradox asks if the universe is like a watch, created by a watchmaker. If we accept that the watch needs a creator, then who created the watchmaker? This raises the issue of infinite regression, the idea that if everything requires a creator, it leads to an endless chain of creators with no clear starting point. The paradox of infinity. Infinity can be paradoxical because it suggests that something can never be fully counted or grasped. For example, can an infinite number of people sit in a room?